remember our venerable house. Opulent and imperial, gazing proudly from its stoic perch above the moor. I lived all my years in that ancient, rumor-shadowed manor. At last, in the salt-soaked crags beneath the lowest foundations, we unearthed that damnable portal antediluvian evil. I beg you, return home, claim your birthright, and deliver our family from the ravenous, clutching shadows of the darkest dungeon.
Well, hello everyone. Ogre27 Kane here today, and we're gonna do a review of Darkest Dungeon for Nintendo Switch. Let's do a brief overview and figure out what we're talking about today. So this is a turn-based roguelike RPG with dungeon crawling elements and certain world-building elements. This game is extremely complex and has just about every mechanic you can possibly endeavor. It has a ton of RNG, a ton of frustration, and yet a ton of fulfillment when you actually accomplish something in it. This game is not quite like any other roguelike you'll ever play. So let's go ahead and break it down, and we'll start out with the gameplay. So I do want to mention real quick that this does have all of the DLC contained on the cartridge, which does include the Shield Breaker, the Color of Madness, the Musketeer, and the Crimson Court content packs. It also has quite a bit more going on, so there is hundreds of hours of gameplay here. Now, the main gameplay loop sees you in this town you're watching here, where you construct your party and you go about different things such as stress relief, or taking quirks off, or upgrading trinkets and abilities, upgrading skills. There's all kinds of stuff you can do in town. Then you set forth on your adventure after taking some much needed provisions like torches and food, and you go through each dungeon, if you will, each one having its own task. After completing the dungeon, you get the reward, which is usually a pretty valuable trinket or something that you need to progress through the story. All of the story elements themselves are fed in between, before and after, and each character, although having a little piece to the story, is not really that important overall. You will lose a lot of characters. They will die constantly on you, and you will always be upgrading and looking for more. It's kind of a nuisance, but at the same time, it's one of the many mechanics that's built into this game. So the combat in this game is both the most fulfilling and most frustrating part to it, as it has a ton of RNG and a ton of mechanics. But don't let that scare you away, because as you learn these, they'll become integral to your strategies and how you go about defeating certain enemies. Each character, if you will, that you build and make up your party with has its own purpose, and some of them are about movement, some of them are about healing, some of them are about damage over time. The damage over time mechanic in this game is massive, as you have a ton of different status effects that deal different damage to different enemies. Some enemies have resistances, and some enemies will use them against you. I absolutely love all of these factors, but when you have a ton of RNG in there, it can really throw you off the rails with one small maneuver. The healing in this game is pretty lackluster, especially after playing the second Darkest Dungeon, which I really feel fixed a lot of the healing mechanics that this one had wrong. But that aside, I truly enjoy the combat, and I think you will too. You just gotta give it a lot of time and learn every piece and facet. Your trinkets and your armor and weapons are a huge portion of how this all works, and you need to learn your positioning and which enemies flourish in said positions. The last thing I'm going to mention about combat is there are some busted abilities and strategies, such as the Highwayman's Grape Shot, which is really useful in the beginning part of the game, so get to know them. Let's do graphics and animations now. So I have to admit, I should not have played Darkest Dungeon 2 before this, because it kinda spoiled it for me. I really saw no fault or error with the graphic or animation or art style in this game whatsoever until I played Darkest Dungeon 2. Darkest Dungeon 2 switched engines to the Unity engine, and the characters are fully rendered 3D models with actual proportions. And this kind of bothers me now going back to this game, as the characters all have big heads and they're all Muppet-like. It's kind of annoying seeing this now, and it kind of ruined it for me, but as far as the performance goes in this game, it is still stellar. I didn't have any issues with frame rate whatsoever, and I didn't have any crashes, which is kind of weird for a roguelike. If you do, though, the game saves constantly, and it's never a problem if you were to experience said things. I didn't have any issues with this, but I do have to notice this now being out of place. All that being said though, get used to a lot of drab, dark colors and a lot of red blood-like images. This game is very dark, deep, and depressing. So let's move on to controls and audio now. So we'll start off with the audio, and I truly enjoyed the audio, but it is kind of basic and you'll hear a lot of the same battle tunes over and over. You'll also hear the narrator say a lot of the same things over and over as well. These didn't really bother me whatsoever, but I'm going to show a little piece of it off now, and you can decide whether or not this is something you could get used to hearing over and over and over.
Such a burden of finery.
Not bad, but very repetitive. The controls, whole nother scale. They're done extremely well, but they are very complicated and take a long time to learn. So read every tutorial you possibly can and understand all of the combination mechanics that work with each button, as there are more selections that need to be made than there are buttons available. So let's hit story now. So the baseline to the story in this game is you're essentially going to help a long-lost family member recover his home, which he tunneled under and released a big demon that has taken over it. It is called the Darkest Dungeon, and it sits on top the hill of this village in which all these other dungeons have spawned from it. You're tasked with creating a team and sending this team into each dungeon to take out said demons or monsters to rise all the way to the top and take out the Darkest Dungeon. Now, this game has a ton of different complexity with its difficulty, and it really does change from time to time what your tasks are doing, and you will beat a lot of the same bosses over and over and over, but it serves this purpose to feed the story in between, and most of the story elements to this game are all bent towards this quest of resecuring the Darkest Dungeon or your family's mansion. Let's do the conclusion now. So in conclusion, this game is fully complete on the cartridge with its DLC, and it's fairly cheap still. There is a ton of gameplay and a ton of hours to get out of this. It all boils down to whether or not you like roguelikes and whether or not you can punish yourself enough to even get through this. Like I said, I'm about 65-70 hours into it, and I still have not defeated the end boss to the game. I get close, but he just annihilates me every single time. That doesn't really bother me because I enjoy these style of games, but this game has a very, very unfair difficulty and it's very punishing. Thank you for watching today's video. It was a blast to make. I upload every single Monday. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day. This is Ogre27 Kane, signing out.
Even in death, the captain shouts his orders, and the crew obeys. Well struck. The ground quakes. Precision and power. A decisive pummeling. Finally, a sailor's death for captain and crew. Fitting.